The small diner was buzzing with the usual lunchtime chatter, the clinking of plates and mugs blending into a familiar hum. Sunlight filtered through the windows, casting warm patterns on the worn wooden floor. The smell of fried eggs, coffee, and toast filled the air. At a corner table, a man in his late 60s sat quietly, sipping his black coffee. His hands were weathered, skin lined with years of hard work, and his eyes carried a depth that suggested a life full of stories. He wore a simple button-up shirt, slightly faded, and a pair of slacks that had seen better days. The man, though unassuming, had an air of calm dignity. Across the diner, a younger man, loud and confident, slid into the booth with a smirk. He had the kind of presence that demanded attention without really earning it. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and clearly enjoyed the sound of his own voice. He had a reputation in town for stirring trouble, enjoying the discomfort of others, and testing boundaries wherever he went. Today, his target was obvious. The older man, who had chosen this quiet spot for his lunch, seemed perfect for humiliation. Well, the younger man started, his voice carrying across the room just enough to be heard by nearby tables. Look who's trying to act all-important in a place like this. What are you, some kind of old war hero or something? He leaned back, grinning, enjoying the sudden attention. The older man didn't flinch. He took a slow sip of his coffee, eyes narrowing slightly, but his body remained relaxed. He had learned long ago that not every provocation deserved a response. Years in situations far more dangerous than a bratty man in a diner had taught him the value of patience. But the younger man wasn't satisfied with a lack of reaction. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. Come on, don't just sit there. I hear stories about guys like you sitting around, telling tales about a war nobody really wants to hear. Bet you love to scare the kids at the park with your medals and stories, huh? His laugh was loud, exaggerated, and forced. Some diners glanced over, sensing the tension. A waitress paused mid-step, unsure whether to intervene. Conversations quieted. The hum of the diner became a background to the confrontation. The older man, still calm, set his coffee down. I don't tell stories to scare anyone, he said evenly, his voice low but firm. I tell them because remembering is important. Not everything you see on TV or read in books can teach you what it's like to live through something real. The younger man laughed again, this time sharper, a bit more aggressive. Remembering? Is that what you call it? I call it showing off. People like you love the attention. Bet you sit around telling everyone you're some big hero, huh? A few diners shifted uncomfortably, sensing the young man's cruelty. He had the kind of charm that could be friendly, but here it was twisted, meant to belittle. The older man's jaw tightened, a small flicker of emotion passing through his eyes, though he kept his voice calm. I don't need anyone to believe me or praise me. I just live my life the best I can, one day at a time. That's all anyone can do. The younger man's smirk faltered for a second, replaced with a slight frown. No reaction. That wasn't supposed to happen. He thrived on getting under people's skin, and here was someone who refused to be rattled. He took a deep breath and tried a new approach. You know, most people your age just want to sit quietly, drink their coffee, and fade into the background. But not you. You want to be remembered? Bet you're still bragging about Vietnam, huh? Probably tell everyone you survived all the horrors, fought in places no one else would go. How's that working out for you now? He leaned back again, pretending to sip his soda, smirking like a predator. The older man's eyes, however, revealed nothing but patience. Vietnam was a long time ago, he said softly, almost to himself, but the lessons stay with you. You don't forget what you've lived through. And you certainly don't forget what you've learned about people, about life. The younger man rolled his eyes, muttering something under his breath about old men and stories. He didn't notice a few heads turning in the diner, people now paying more attention. Some were uncomfortable, others intrigued. There was something about the older man that commanded a quiet respect, even in his silence. It wasn't flashy. It was subtle, but it was there. He leaned forward again, voice louder this time, clearly trying to provoke a reaction. Look, old man, I'm just saying people like you think they're special because they survived a war. But life's moved on, hasn't it? Nobody cares about your medals, your stories, or your secrets. Get over yourself. The older man finally set down his fork, his eyes meeting the younger man's directly. There was no fear, no anger, just a quiet strength. Secrets. Everyone has them. Some people hide behind them, letting them control their lives. Others live with them, learn from them, and keep moving forward. You're looking for control, I see. You think belittling others will make you stronger? It won't. Strength comes from understanding, from patience, from knowing yourself. That's something you'll learn someday if you survive long enough to see it. The younger man froze for a moment, a little taken aback. He had expected rage, maybe trembling, maybe embarrassment, but not a lesson. Not calm clarity. He opened his mouth, searching for a comeback, but the older man didn't flinch. He just picked up his coffee and took another slow sip, as if the moment were nothing. The diner had gone quiet. A few people were watching intently, sensing that this was no ordinary confrontation. The older man's presence filled the space, commanding attention without needing to raise his voice or make a scene. There was dignity in his posture, a quiet authority born of years of facing real danger, real pain, and real loss. It was impossible not to notice. The younger man shifted uncomfortably in his seat, realizing his usual tactics weren't working. He was used to people folding under pressure, to seeing fear or embarrassment, to gaining a cheap thrill at someone else's expense. But here, there was none of that. Instead, there was calm, there was experience, and there was the faint but unmistakable air of someone who had seen and survived far worse. He tried one last jab, softer this time, unsure. I bet you're all alone most of the time. Nobody really wants to hear these stories. You're just old news. The older man's eyes softened, but there was no pity, no arrogance. Lonely? Perhaps. But solitude is not weakness. It's an opportunity. You learn to listen, to observe, to understand things you might otherwise miss. And those who care will always know your worth, not because of the stories you tell, but because of the life you live every day. A waitress finally stepped closer, clearing her throat gently. She had been watching, unsure how to intervene. Sir, maybe we can just enjoy our lunch, she suggested politely, giving the younger man a small, knowing glance. The younger man muttered something under his breath, clearly irritated but lacking the energy to escalate further. He slammed a few bills on the table and stood up, muttering about having better things to do. The older man watched him leave, taking another sip of his coffee, calm as ever. The diner slowly returned to its usual rhythm, though the tension lingered, like a note held in the air. For the older man, it was just another day. But for those who had witnessed the exchange, there was a lesson in quiet strength. Sometimes the most powerful presence isn't loud or aggressive. Sometimes it's the calm, patient, unshakable kind that doesn't need to prove anything, that has lived through enough to know what truly matters. And that kind of strength, the kind that survives wars and time itself, carries its own quiet victory. After the younger man stormed out, the diner slowly returned to its normal rhythm. But the older man remained seated, quietly finishing his coffee. He stared out the window, watching the sun glint off passing cars and the occasional pedestrian hurrying by. His mind wandered back to the early days of his life, to a time when the world was a very different place and decisions were a matter of life and death. He remembered joining the army, feeling the mix of fear and determination that comes with stepping into the unknown. Training was grueling, not just physically but mentally. He had to learn how to trust his instincts, to rely on his fellow soldiers, and to confront situations that seemed impossible. Nights were often the hardest, filled with a silence that felt alive, where memories of what he had seen and done refused to let him rest. He thought of the friends he had lost, the battles he had fought, and the scars, both visible and invisible, that had shaped him. But he also remembered the small victories, moments that seemed insignificant at the time, but had built his sense of strength and resilience. The camaraderie with others, the quiet moments of reflection, the letters from home that reminded him why he endured. Those memories, even the painful ones, had given him a depth that could not be shaken by someone like the man in the diner. A young waitress approached, carrying a fresh cup of coffee. "Sir, would you like some more?" she asked gently. Her eyes were curious, perhaps sensing that he had been through more than most people could imagine. He nodded with a small smile, appreciating the simple kindness. "Yes, thank you. That would be nice," he said, as she walked away. He thought about how people rarely understood the weight of experiences like his. Many saw the medals, the uniforms, the titles, and assumed they understood the man behind them. They did not. They did not see the late nights, the endless reflection, the lessons learned in the shadows. They did not see the quiet determination that carried him through life long after the battles ended. The diner door opened, and a few new customers came in, bringing with them the chatter of everyday life. Children laughed, a couple argued playfully, and someone dropped a napkin with a soft thud. The sounds were ordinary, almost mundane, but to him they were comforting. Life went on. People lived, loved, and sometimes clashed, and that was the rhythm he had learned to respect. He remembered another moment from his past, a time when he had encountered someone similar to the younger man in the diner, a man full of arrogance and loud words, trying to assert power over others. Back then, he had learned an important lesson. Confrontation was not always about winning in the moment. Sometimes it was about holding your ground with calmness and letting your presence speak for itself. That lesson had carried him through decades, shaping the way he approached challenges and conflict. He thought about how easily people judged without understanding, how quickly they assumed weakness in the face of silence, mistaking patience for fear. They did not see the internal strength, the ability to remain composed when chaos swirled around them. It was not about ego. It was about living with integrity and showing the world who you truly were without needing to shout it. Outside, a breeze stirred the trees, and he could hear the faint rustle of leaves. It reminded him of the quiet moments during his service. Nights spent in tents under the stars, the world vast and unknowable around him. Those moments had taught him humility and awareness, and they had left a mark that could not be erased by ridicule or disrespect. A young man entered the diner, hesitating at the entrance, as if unsure where to sit. The older man noticed him, offering a slight nod and a welcoming glance. Sometimes he thought the world was full of people looking for guidance, even in small ways. A smile or a moment of attention could mean more than any words of wisdom ever spoken. As he sipped his coffee, he reflected on the importance of memory. It's not just personal memory, but collective memory. He remembered the faces of those he had served, with the towns and villages he had passed through, the people who had been caught in situations far beyond their control, remembering their stories, honoring their struggles, and learning from their courage had shaped him into the man he was today. The younger man's words earlier had left no mark. He realized that confrontation often came from insecurity, from a desire to feel larger than oneself. It was a lesson he had learned early in life, a lesson that carried through to every interaction. When someone tried to belittle or intimidate, the response was not to mirror their anger, but to remain grounded, to project confidence without aggression, and to let the truth of one's life speak louder than any insult. The older man finished his coffee and set the cup down carefully. He looked around the diner, observing people as they moved through their routines. He noticed small acts of kindness, glimpses of joy, moments of connection. These details, though often overlooked, were what made life meaningful. They reminded him that even after years of hardship and struggle, there was always room for compassion and understanding. He remembered another lesson from his time in the army. Understanding people was more powerful than confrontation. You could see the motives, the fears, and the insecurities behind actions. Most people acted from a place of self-interest or insecurity. Recognizing this allowed him to respond appropriately, with calmness and insight, rather than reacting emotionally. The day continued, and the diner filled with the rhythms of ordinary life. People came and went, carrying their worries, joys, and stories with them. The older man stayed, quietly observing and reflecting. He thought about the younger man again, realizing that this encounter was not about him. It was about the younger, man's need to assert power and his own inability to understand what true strength meant. He thought about patience, the virtue that had carried him through decades. Patience was not passive. It was an active choice, a conscious decision to respond thoughtfully rather than impulsively. It was a lesson learned in moments of extreme danger, when one wrong move could cost lives. It was a lesson that applied as much to a diner confrontation as it did to the battlefield. As he prepared to leave, he reflected on the importance of living with dignity. The younger man's words had been loud, aggressive, and intended to wound, but they had no lasting power. True dignity was quiet, steady, and unshakable. It came from living authentically, from treating others with respect, and from facing life's challenges with courage and wisdom. He left the diner slowly, appreciating the warmth of the sun on his face. The encounter had been a reminder of how far he had come, how much he had learned, and how important it was to carry oneself with integrity. Life would continue with its challenges and confrontations, but he knew that his strength, built over decades of experience, would always guide him. Walking down the street, he observed the world around him, the children playing, the people chatting, the small acts of kindness that often went unnoticed. These were the moments that truly mattered. The lessons from the past were valuable, but it was how one applied them in the present that defined character. He felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that he had handled the situation with calm and dignity. The younger man's need to provoke had been met not with anger, but with quiet strength. It was a subtle victory, one that would not make headlines, but carried its own profound significance. As he disappeared into the afternoon light, he carried with him the knowledge that life's challenges, big and small, were best faced with patience, wisdom, and quiet resilience. The world might test him, but he was prepared, grounded by decades of experience and a life lived with purpose and integrity. And that, he knew, was worth far more than any fleeting insult or act of cruelty. Days passed after the encounter in the diner, but the memory of the younger man's words lingered in the older man's mind, not with anger, but with a quiet curiosity. He had faced far worse in his life, yet he knew that sometimes people who tried to belittle others had deeper reasons hidden behind their aggression. It was not just about disrespect, it was about fear, insecurity, and the need to feel in control. He understood that better than most. The veteran spent his morning in his modest home, making himself a simple breakfast of eggs and toast. Sunlight poured through the kitchen window, and he listened to the faint hum of the neighborhood waking up. He pored over a stack of letters and photos from his past, reminders of friends, battles, and moments that had shaped him. Each photo held a story, each letter a memory. These were not relics, but pieces of a life lived fully, with courage and reflection. As he sat with his coffee, a knock came at the door. He opened it to find a young man standing there, hesitating, unsure of what to say. It was not the same man from the diner, but someone who had heard about the incident and wanted to understand. The veteran invited him in, and they sat at the small kitchen table. The young man fidgeted, nervous, unsure how to approach someone with so much history and quiet authority. The veteran spoke gently, encouraging conversation without judgment. He asked about the young man's life, his struggles and his fears. Slowly the young man opened up, sharing stories of his own insecurities and the pressure he felt to prove himself. It became clear that his aggression in the diner was a mask, a way to hide feelings of inadequacy and vulnerability. The veteran listened patiently, offering insight and perspective from decades of experience. He spoke of resilience, courage, and the value of understanding oneself. His words were simple but carried the weight of lived experience, resonating with the young man in ways that textbooks and lectures never could. After the visitor left, the veteran went for a walk through the neighborhood, letting the fresh air clear his mind. He observed children playing in the park, neighbors greeting one another, and the ordinary rhythms of life. Each interaction reminded him of the importance of empathy, patience, and understanding. People often acted from a place of fear or misunderstanding, and it was his experience that allowed him to navigate these situations with calmness and grace. During the walk, he passed a small community center, where a group of veterans gathered regularly. He stopped to chat with them, sharing stories, advice, and camaraderie. These interactions reinforced the lessons he had learned in his lifetime, that strength was not measured by dominance or aggression, but by patience, understanding, and the ability to guide others without imposing fear. He recalled a friend from his service who had often said, "True strength lies in lifting others, not pushing them down." That thought stayed with him throughout the day. Later, he returned to the diner, drawn by a sense of unfinished business. The younger man was not there, but the atmosphere felt different. Patrons who had witnessed the earlier confrontation greeted him with respect, acknowledging the quiet dignity he carried. It was a reminder that actions rooted in integrity often left a lasting impact, even if unspoken. He took a booth near the window, ordered his coffee, and reflected on the nature of confrontation. He realized that many conflicts in life were not about the individuals involved, but about the lessons that emerged from them. Each encounter provided an opportunity to demonstrate patience, wisdom, and resilience. The memory of the diner incident became less about insult and more about understanding human behavior, learning and guiding others through example. As he sipped his coffee, he noticed a familiar face approaching the younger man from the diner. This time, there was a hesitance in his steps, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. He did not speak immediately, instead standing awkwardly near the counter as if unsure how to begin. The veteran watched calmly, offering no judgment, only a quiet presence that seemed to invite reconciliation. The younger man finally spoke, his voice quieter, less certain. I didn't mean to cause trouble the other day. I just didn't know how to handle. Seeing someone like you, someone who, I don't know, has lived through so much. I guess I was trying to make myself feel bigger, I guess." The veteran nodded slowly, understanding without condescension. "It's all right," he said gently. "We all face moments where we act from fear or insecurity. The important thing is to recognize it and learn from it. You have a chance now to do that." The younger man's eyes widened slightly, the weight of realization beginning to settle in. For the first time, he saw that aggression and loudness did not define strength. The calm, composed demeanor of the older man, shaped by decades of experience, spoke far louder than words or displays of dominance. It was a lesson that could not be taught in anger, only observed and internalized. The conversation continued, moving from the diner to a quiet walk outside. They talked about life, choices, and the impact of actions on others. The veteran shared lessons about resilience, patience, and empathy, recounting experiences that had taught him the value of understanding rather than confrontation. The younger man listened intently, absorbing the wisdom in simple human terms. He began to see how his behavior had been shaped by fear, insecurity, and a desire for control. And he felt a budding desire to change. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, the two returned to the diner briefly, where the veteran introduced the younger man to a few patrons who had witnessed the earlier incident. The introduction was simple, without fanfare, yet it marked a turning point. The younger man realized that respect and dignity were earned through understanding and behavior, not through intimidation or loud words. The veteran's presence had a subtle but profound effect on the atmosphere. Patrons observed the interaction, noting the transformation in the younger man's demeanor. It was a reminder that actions rooted in empathy and patience could ripple outward, influencing others and creating an environment where respect and understanding prevailed. After leaving the diner, the veteran walked home, reflecting on the day's events. He thought about the young man, the conversations, and the lessons shared. Life had a way of presenting challenges, sometimes in the form of confrontation, other times as opportunities for guidance. His role was not to dominate or punish, but to demonstrate the power of patience, wisdom, and quiet strength. Back at home, he sat in his favorite chair, reviewing old letters and photographs once more. Each image, each note, carried a lesson about life, resilience, and the human spirit. He realized that the encounter in the diner, while seemingly insignificant, had become a meaningful reflection of these principles. The younger man's growth, however small, was a testament to the enduring power of empathy and experience. As night fell, the veteran looked out his window at the calm streets, the world continuing in its ordinary rhythm. He felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that he had remained true to his principles, demonstrated strength without aggression, and perhaps guided someone toward understanding. It was a victory not of confrontation, but of human connection, patience, and insight. He understood that life would continue to test both himself and others, but the lessons of patience, dignity, and empathy would remain. He had seen the effects of true strength, lived through hardship, and discovered that the quiet, steady approach often left a deeper mark than any loud display of power. It was a principle he would carry forward, shaping each interaction, guiding each moment, and influencing those around him without needing to force it. The evening passed quietly, filled with reflection and appreciation for life's simple rhythms. The veteran's mind was calm, his heart steady, and his spirit grounded in decades of experience. He knew that the world was full of challenges, misunderstandings, and opportunities for growth, and he was prepared to meet them with the same quiet strength that had carried him through everything else. The diner encounter was no longer a point of tension, but a reminder of the enduring power of calmness, wisdom, and human connection. The following week, the veteran returned to the diner, the familiar warmth of the place comforting him. It had become a small ritual: coffee, quiet observation, a few moments of reflection. Life had a rhythm that reminded him of simpler days, even when the world outside seemed busy and restless. As he settled into a booth by the window, he noticed the younger man from before walking in. This time, his posture was hesitant, unsure, but determined. The encounter that had begun with hostility was evolving into something different. The younger man approached cautiously, taking a seat across from the veteran. There was a pause, a moment where words seemed unnecessary. The diner hummed around them, the conversations of others blending into a comforting backdrop. He was not the same man who had tried to belittle and provoke. The tension had softened, replaced by a desire to understand, to seek guidance, and perhaps to make amends. The veteran nodded, offering a small, welcoming smile. "Sit down. We can talk if you like," he said gently. The words carried no judgment, only an invitation. The younger man exhaled, relief mixing with uncertainty, and began to speak. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened the other day." "About what you said?" "I realize that I've been trying to make myself feel bigger by making others feel smaller. I don't even know why. I guess I'm scared, or maybe I just don't trust myself." The veteran listened intently, nodding slowly. "It takes courage to recognize that," he said. "Most people never do. Fear can make us act in ways we don't understand, but reflection, honesty, and the willingness to change, that's what really matters. It's not the mistakes themselves, but what you do after that counts." As the younger man spoke, he revealed more about his past. He shared stories of family pressure, of mistakes made in youth, and of moments of insecurity that had shaped his behavior. The veteran responded not with criticism, but with insight drawn from a lifetime of experience. He explained that understanding oneself and others required patience, empathy, and honesty. Life was not about asserting power through aggression, but about learning, growing, and helping others along the way. Throughout the conversation, the diner's atmosphere remained ordinary. Yet the exchange between the two men was extraordinary in its quiet intensity. Patrons glanced occasionally, sensing that something meaningful was unfolding. There were no raised voices, no dramatic gestures, only the calm presence of someone who had seen life's extremes and someone willing to learn from it. The veteran shared lessons from his military service, moments when patience and understanding had saved lives, and times when listening and observing had been more powerful than action. He spoke of comrades lost, of choices made under pressure, and of the realization that true strength was measured not by dominance, but by resilience, courage, and wisdom. The younger man absorbed these lessons, his initial defensiveness melting away. After a while, the conversation shifted. The veteran recounted a particular mission from his past, a situation that had tested every skill, every instinct, and every ounce of courage he possessed. It was a story not meant to intimidate, but to illustrate the principles of resilience, awareness, and calmness under pressure. As he spoke, the younger man listened, eyes wide. Sensing the depth of experience behind each word, the story took an unexpected turn when the veteran revealed a subtle detail, something only someone familiar with the events or certain individuals could know. The younger man's expression changed immediately, recognition dawning. He realized that the veteran knew more than he had expected. Not just about general experiences, but about the subtleties, secrets, and hidden truths that were rarely spoken aloud. There was a pause, a moment of silent understanding that shifted the power dynamic entirely. For the first time, the younger man felt vulnerability, the realization that the tables had turned in a way he had never anticipated. The veteran did not raise his voice or threaten. He simply shared knowledge and insight that exposed arrogance and ignorance without malice. The effect was profound. The younger man saw himself clearly, not through the lens of ego, but through the reflection provided by someone who had lived fully and observed carefully. The lesson was subtle but undeniable. Knowledge, experience, and calm presence could reveal truths that aggression never could. The veteran's ability to remain composed, to speak from experience, and to share insight transformed a potential confrontation into a teaching moment. The younger man began to understand that life's power dynamics were not always obvious, that respect was earned through integrity and wisdom, not loudness or cruelty. The conversation continued with practical guidance. The veteran spoke of how to navigate challenges, deal with fear, and make choices rooted in reflection rather than reaction. He emphasized the importance of observing before acting, understanding motives, and choosing responses that aligned with personal integrity. The younger man absorbed each point, slowly integrating the lessons into his own understanding of himself and the world. As they spoke, a few patrons observed the change in demeanor. The diner, once a stage for humiliation, had become a classroom of life's subtle lessons. Respect, patience, and insight replaced tension and aggression. The younger man's posture relaxed, his tone softened, and his eyes reflected a newfound awareness. There was a sense of growth, a quiet transformation unfolding in real time. The veteran concluded the encounter with a reflection on dignity and the long-term effects of actions. "People will test you," he said softly. "Some will try to provoke, to belittle, to dominate. But how you respond defines who you are. Patience, understanding, and quiet strength leave a lasting mark that words alone cannot achieve. Remember that what you choose to reveal and how you choose to act can have effects far beyond the moment." The younger man nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude and humility. He realized that he had been acting from insecurity and fear, but now he had a roadmap for change. It was not an instant transformation, but a starting point of foundation built on understanding, insight, and the quiet power of experience. After leaving the diner, the veteran walked home, reflecting on the day. He understood that true lessons were not about dominance, but about guidance, and that life often provided opportunities to teach without forcing or imposing. The encounter had started with confrontation but had evolved into understanding, demonstrating the power of patience, wisdom, and human connection. At home, he sat in his favorite chair, reviewing old letters and photographs. Each memory reinforced the principles he had shared: resilience, observation, and integrity. The diner encounter had become another story in a life full of lessons. Yet it was one that might continue to influence others in ways he could not fully see. He thought about the younger man's transformation and realized that guidance, when offered with empathy and experience, could leave a mark far deeper than punishment or anger. The moment of revelation had not been about exposing faults for humiliation, but about showing truths in a way that could lead to growth. This was the kind of impact that mattered most, a ripple of understanding spreading quietly but powerfully as night fell. He looked out the window at the quiet streets, feeling a sense of peace. The confrontation had become a teaching moment, a lesson in understanding, and a reminder of the enduring power of calm, experienced insight. Life would continue to present challenges, but he knew that integrity, patience, and quiet wisdom would always be the strongest tools in navigating them. The days that followed the diner encounter were quiet but filled with subtle change. The younger man seemed different each time he crossed paths with the veteran. There was a cautious respect in his demeanor, a sense of humility that had not been there before. He no longer sought attention through loud words or aggressive gestures. Instead, he observed, listened, and reflected a transformation that spoke louder than any apology could. The veteran continued his daily routines, simple yet purposeful. Mornings spent walking through the neighborhood, afternoons at the diner, evenings reflecting on letters and photographs. Each activity held meaning, a rhythm that grounded him in life's continuity. Even though the confrontation had passed, he remained aware that life had a way of presenting new challenges. Patience, he knew, was not just a response to a single incident, but a lifelong practice. One afternoon, as he sat at the diner, he noticed the younger man approaching again. This time he came with a small notebook in hand, hesitating slightly before taking a seat across from the veteran. There was an unspoken acknowledgement in the air, a shared understanding that the past confrontation had shifted into a space of dialogue and learning. The younger man spoke quietly, almost reverently. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about patience, understanding, and observing before acting. I realize that I've been trying to prove myself in the wrong ways. I don't want to be like that anymore." His words were steady, but carried the weight of genuine reflection. The veteran nodded, taking a slow sip of coffee. "It's a start," he said gently. "Understanding where you went wrong and choosing to change is more powerful than any act of aggression or display of dominance. It's a lesson many people never learn." Voice carried the calm authority of someone who had lived through extreme challenges and emerged with clarity. The younger man opened the notebook and began to write. Inspired by the conversation, he jotted down notes, reflections, and lessons he wanted to remember. Each page became a roadmap for personal growth, a record of transformation guided by wisdom and experience. The veteran observed quietly, offering encouragement without intrusion. He understood that change came from within and could not be forced. Over the next few weeks, the interactions between the two men became more consistent. They would meet at the diner, share stories, and discuss life lessons. The younger man asked questions, seeking insight into resilience, courage, and integrity. The veteran shared experiences from his military service, its moments of challenge and loss, and the quiet victories that came from patience and understanding. Each story was not meant to impress, but to illustrate principles that had guided him through life. One afternoon, the conversation took a deeper turn. The younger man asked about the hardships the veteran had faced and how he had overcome them. The veteran spoke of fear, loss, and uncertainty, but also of determination, camaraderie, and the importance of making thoughtful choices. He explained that life often presented situations where the right response was not obvious, but the ability to remain calm and observe could reveal the best path forward. The younger man listened intently, absorbing the lessons not as abstract concepts, but as practical guidance for navigating his own life. He began to see that true strength was not measured by dominance, aggression, or loud words. It was measured by patience, understanding, empathy, and the courage to act with integrity. The realization was profound, reshaping his approach to relationships, challenges, and self-reflection as their meetings continued. The younger man began to share his own experiences with the veteran, discussing moments where he had acted impulsively or allowed fear to guide his actions. The veteran responded with insight and encouragement, helping him to understand patterns, recognize triggers, and develop strategies for growth. Each conversation became a building block, constructing a foundation of self-awareness, confidence, and resilience. One day, the veteran suggested a walk through the nearby park, a place where nature offered perspective and calm. As they walked, he pointed out small details, the way sunlight filtered through the trees, the patterns of birds in flight, the quiet resilience of plants growing through cracks in the pavement. These observations became metaphors for life, patience, adaptation, and quiet strength. The younger man began to understand that lessons were not always delivered through words alone. They were also found in observation, reflection, and attentiveness to the world around him. The veteran shared a story from his service in Vietnam, a mission where careful observation and patience had saved lives. He explained how impulsive action could lead to disaster, and how understanding context, motives, and timing was crucial. The younger man realized that the lesson applied not only to extreme situations, but to everyday life: how to handle conflict, how to communicate effectively, and how to build respect and trust. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, they returned to the diner. The veteran's presence had a calming effect on the environment. Patrons noticed the change in the younger man's demeanor, subtle but clear difference from the aggression that had marked their first encounter. Respect had replaced arrogance, reflection had replaced impulse, and curiosity had replaced confrontation. The veterans summarized their journey with a simple statement: life is full of challenges, and people will test you in ways you do not expect. The way you respond defines who you are. Integrity, patience, and understanding are more powerful than aggression or dominance. Influence is gained through wisdom, not intimidation. Remember that, and it will guide you through any situation. The younger man nodded, feeling the weight and clarity of the lesson. He understood that the transformation was ongoing, a lifelong process, but the foundation had been laid. He felt a sense of gratitude and humility. Recognizing the veteran's patience and willingness to share wisdom without judgment, in the weeks that followed, the younger man began to demonstrate the changes in his behavior. He treated others with more respect, listened more attentively, and reflected before acting. The ripple effects of the encounter extended beyond the diner, influencing interactions at work, in the neighborhood, and in personal relationships. The lessons imparted by the veteran became a guiding framework, shaping decisions, actions, and perspectives. The veteran observed the transformation with quiet satisfaction. He understood that life offered moments where influence could be exerted not through force, but through example, wisdom, and guidance. The younger man's growth was a testament to the enduring power of patience, empathy, and human connection. It was a victory not of confrontation, but of understanding and transformation. One evening, as the veteran returned home, he reflected on the entire experience. The initial insult in the diner, the tension, and the confrontation had been catalysts for change. What had begun as a moment of conflict had evolved into a profound lesson in human behavior, resilience, and personal growth. The veteran recognized that life often presented opportunities for teaching and learning in unexpected ways. He sat by the window, reviewing photographs and letters once more. Each memory, each encounter, had contributed to a life rich with experience and insight. He realized that the greatest victories were not always visible to others, but were measured by the quiet changes they inspired in the lives of those around them. The younger man, now more reflective and grounded, continued to seek guidance occasionally, but the relationship had shifted from confrontation to mentorship. The diner had become a space not of humiliation but of learning, respect, and personal growth. The veteran's influence extended quietly yet powerfully, a reminder that human connection, wisdom, and integrity could shape lives in ways that aggression never could. As night fell, the streets were calm, the neighborhood settling into its quiet rhythm. The veteran felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that the lessons of patience, resilience, and integrity had taken root. The confrontation that once threatened to define a day had become a lifelong teaching moment. The younger man had begun to transform, guided by insight, example, and human connection, demonstrating the enduring impact of understanding, empathy, and wisdom in the end. The story was not about the insult or the initial conflict. It was about the power of calm, thoughtful presence, the importance of integrity, and the way experience could guide and shape others. The veteran understood that true strength lay not in dominance, but in influence, not in aggression, but in patience, and not in words alone, but in living by example. And as he sat quietly in the glow of the evening, he felt a quiet peace, knowing that the lessons shared would continue to ripple outward, touching lives and shaping choices long after the moment of confrontation had passed.